Bitcoin mining, Bitcoin wallet, blockchain, stablecoins, Metanet, the evolution of money. Everybody is talking about Bitcoin today, but what exactly is it? Learn the basics from experts. Learn what Bitcoin is, how it works, and why it matters. Bitcoin 101, your ultimate guide to the fundamentals of blockchain.
Hello and welcome back to the show. Today we have Jon Southurst joining us from CoinGeek and the Bitcoin Bridge. It is the Bitcoin Bridge, right? Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, that was a show I did on CoinGeek. But
Yeah.
before I talk about that, I just want to say hi, Brittany. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm actually pretty honored to be here.
Really? Oh,
You did requests myself, so it's flattering.
I appreciate you coming on the show. I'm excited to chat with you today. I was really excited when you agreed to come on the show, so it's just as much of an honor for me as it is as you say it is for you. So I appreciate that.
People might not know this, but this is actually the first time I've ever spoken to you face to face.
Yeah, that is true. I went to the Bitcoin Miami, but that's the only meetup that I've gone to so far. So the next meetup,
Right.
we'll have to see each other and say hi.
For sure. Yeah, it's been a while since I went to Miami, unfortunately. It's my favorite US city.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, I like it there.
I don't live too
Not so
far
much
off
in the
from
hurry.
Miami.
Really?
Yeah, I live in Atlanta, so
Bitcoin lives somewhere in Florida, somewhere up that East Coast.
yeah. Um, I don't know. Um,
And
yeah, anyway. So Jon, I was hoping to get to know you a little bit better. I was hoping maybe you could start us off with like a brief introductory into your background and how and when you became involved in Bitcoin.
well, my background is pretty boring. I just went through the normal thing, and I sort of fell into tech. I was doing tech PR, back in the 90s, in the early day of the internet. And that's not as much fun as it sounds, because I wasn't really doing cool internet stuff. We were doing like boring GIS and sat nav and all that kind of thing, which in 1995 it seemed impressive. It doesn't seem so impressive when I look back on it now, but it was kind of cool. But that's where I got that interest in tech in the first place. And and then yeah, for a while, then I just moved around and started to live in other countries. I come from Australia originally, and like a lot of Australians, I just had to get out of there sooner or later. And so I went to Canada for a couple of years, lived there, and yeah, then when I got back, got bored really quickly and decided to come to Japan instead. So that's where I am now.
What made you
Been
want to
here
move to
about 20
Japan
years.
specifically?
Yeah, good question, hey. um, if people ask me that a lot, I don't have a good answer for it. I think at the time, I was still taken by that, Japan is the future thing. And it still is in many ways. But not in that, 80s cyberpunk way that, appealed to me back then. I used to learn Japanese in high school, so the place had always had this kind of, allure for me. I had to come here at some stage or another. And I was just gonna do that thing where you just come here and teach English for a year or so, and then just go somewhere else and do something else. I had zero long-term plans to stay here, and that was 20 years ago, right? And people said to me when I first got here, they said, "Oh yeah, yeah, you say that now, but within 5 years, you're gonna be married, you're gonna have kids." And I was like, oh, "Come on!" And yeah, they were right. So
That's great. So I'm assuming you speak how would you say it? I think I know a little bit. Nihongo ga wakarimasu ka? Is that it? Do you speak Japanese? I can't remember from
oh, no. That's the ironic thing. I'm actually not that great at Japanese. I think I was all right at it for a couple of years there back in the late 2010s, but sorry, late zeros. But after my son was born and I started working from home all the time, and I just don't interact with anybody here anymore. So I just my Japanese just got worse, and I never really acquired anymore. So the only people I speak to are like my wife and son, and so I can say thank you and please and basic sort of conversational things out in the world pretty well because I do that every day. But beyond that, if I had to explain myself, if I had a traffic accident or if I had some sort of problem or anything at all, really, I'm pretty crap at it. And that can be verified by the Japanese Bitcoiners as well.
Oh my gosh. Oh, well, do you get to hang out with is there like any communities or like individuals there that form groups around like Bitcoin or other, like cryptocurrencies and things like that that you get to go hang out with or
Yeah, we used to have one of the better, Bitcoin meetups in the world, and one of the first ones too, because it was started by Roger Ver
Mm.
here in Japan,
Oh, very cool.
and his buddies, and Ken Shishido, who I just want to make a special mention to because he was the first Bitcoiner I ever spoke to. He changed my life. Yeah, he's still with us in BSB, which is good.
Very cool.
So much. Where after the coin splits happened,
Mm.
in 2017, at first, everyone switched to BCH,
Hmm.
Bitcoin Cash, because again, Roger Ver and all these guys, and then, I mean, they're still there, really. That the Bitcoin Cash meetup is still like the predominant, crypto meetup or Bitcoin meetup here in Japan. I still get invites to it every week, but I haven't been for a while. And we tried to kick something off in BSB. Like we've had a few sort of half-hearted attempts, but when Shem Boothbane,
Hmm.
Captain Bitcoin, landed here in Japan, suddenly he brought that Shem energy with him. And he said, like, we gotta get a meetup happening, we gotta, and everyone's like, yeah, okay, yeah, I guess we should. We've been talking about it for 2 years. And so he dragged us all out, and we got out and we had a meetup last week, and it was pretty good. Some of that old spirit was there, and I hope we can make it a regular thing. He says he's gonna set up a BSB hub here in Japan,
A citadel.
and that's right, the citadel. I was trying to think of the word that he used.
That's
Hub is what
awesome.
you have, right?
um, oh man, that's awesome. I know that we have like a small little meetup here in Atlanta as well. Like Rory Zimmerman and Joshua Hensley and a couple of other guys, Billy Bitcoins. We get to meet up every so often and say hi. And so it's always fun to chat Bitcoin and see what everybody is up to. Um, I think Britton Gunning even joined us one weekend a couple of months ago, so that was really fun. Um, I love the energy in general when you get together with other people, like-minded individuals to discuss Bitcoin because everybody gets together and everybody's so passionate about it. And so the conversations are really, you know, really great and in depth. So I'm curious. I know that you've been an interviewer for a long time. You were saying that you kind of went through this transition, like, oh, I'm gonna travel the world, and I'm into tech, so Japan seems like a cool place to explore tech at. And then you said, who was it that introduced you to Bitcoin? You just mentioned his name a minute ago.
Ken Shishido.
So,
He just
go ahead.
I just remembered I never actually told the Bitcoin story. So yeah, Ken was the first Bitcoiner I ever met, but I was kind of into it before then. As a bored tech writer living in Tokyo, like there's not a whole lot to do here. I don't have any actual IT skills other than reporting and writing. So I was just I was what I was doing was I was teaching English at banks, like Lehman Brothers, Goldman Sachs, and all those places. And so I was kind of interested in finance just because of all that work I was doing. The guys I was teaching, supposedly, they were pretty high level, so it was mainly just conversation. So I just got it to go in and talk to bankers a lot of the time. And it was, during the financial crisis and everything was going bad, and I was trying to figure out why it was going bad. And from there, you get into Austrian economics and sound money and that kind of thing. And then just, it all sort of coincided at the same time. That's when Bitcoin came along. So yeah, I sort of got into it slowly. There wasn't really this big aha moment.
Mm.
I think the first thing, this is kind of embarrassing to admit now. The first thing I did was like I installed Bitcoin QT on my MacBook, and I was trying to mine with it, and I think this is like 2012 or something, because it still had the button that said start mining. So I chose that. I knew nothing about Bitcoin except that I had it on my computer. I didn't have any actual Bitcoins. I just had the QT on my computer, and I was thinking like, so when do the Bitcoins start arriving? And I think I let it run for about a week, and it was probably still downloading the blockchain, and it just made the fans whir all the time, and like that horrible sound of laptop fans. So I'm like, this is crazy. It's not actually doing anything. I'm not getting any Bitcoins, and and it's just slowing down my computer. So I think at that point, I deleted it and turned it off. I had no idea what it's for. I didn't know the word blockchain. I'd learned nothing about Bitcoin or how it worked. I just knew it was some kind of internet money experiment. And then I just sort of forgot about it for a while. And then one day I was walking to work and I listened to just a regular tech podcast, but they were talking to Gavin Andresen, and he explained what Bitcoin was, how it worked, and what it was all for, and it was that moment the penny dropped. So like if I could say I had an aha moment, it was then. It was probably about late 2012 or something. So I just started, cramming, trying to find out as much as I could, and learning all about it. And yeah, in 2013, discovered the Tokyo Bitcoin meetup. That's where I met Ken and Roger and those guys. And yep, it's pretty much history from there.
So I have it begs the question. If you were, around Roger and them, you obviously made the transition, like you said, from BTC to BCH, and then it was an obvious choice to kind of go and fall into BSB, I'm assuming. Um, but along the
So yeah,
way there, I did a bit of sleuthing around into your background, preparing myself for the interview, and
I'm curious.
I'd found on one of these YouTubes that you had actually done an interview with Charles Hodgkinson a long, long time ago. We're talking like like around the fork, or you know. And so I'm curious, were you interested in other cryptocurrencies before everything went down, or was that something that you were just like, I'm still trying to find my way type of deal?
Right. I think I have to separate, like what I do as a reporter from what I'm interested in
Of
personally.
course. Right, right.
Because I used to I worked for CoinDesk from 2013 to 2015.
Okay.
And you know what they do, they're just general crypto. They were only just starting out when I started there, so nobody used to read it back then.
Right.
And after that, I actually worked for Roger over at bitcoin.com.
Oh, very cool.
It was during the era of the Satoshi outing around 2016. At the end of that year, a couple of my friends, we decided to start our own site, and that was called Bits Online, and we ran that for 2 years. And again, it was very blockchain agnostic. We didn't really advocate for one over the other. We After a while, we just sort of lent more towards the big blocker projects, Bitcoin
Okay.
Cash, that kind of thing. But we still reported on
Everything.
BTC core updates, that kind of thing, just because we were a general news site. So it's yeah, it wasn't really till so 2019 that I had to decide, to make that choice. Which
Right.
one do I like myself, because this is all just splintering in all sorts of directions, and it's kind of crazy. If you write an article about Bitcoin Cash, then the core guys will complain about it, and if you write an article about core, yeah, etc. And if you say anything good about Ethereum, you, I didn't really want. I wasn't saying anything good about Ethereum. I just write about a protocol update or something, and everyone's like, "Why are you giving those guys publicity?" So yeah, it just came time to pick a side.
Yeah, I hear you. So, kind of as a side note here, I got two questions now. One is, what was your overall impression of like Roger Ver? Because I've had other people who aren't so much in the BSV community say, "Oh man, Roger Ver really screwed me over when he came out and said, Mt. Gox was, safe or whatever." Because I ended up losing all my funds right after that. And I know Roger came out and apologized for that or whatever. But during that time, what was the general vibe in the communities back in that time when all of those things were going and Mount Gox went down?
I think we were kind of united in our grief because everyone who was here in Japan, of course, used Mount Gox because it was the easiest exchange to use. It was local. They used Japanese currency.
Right,
We didn't interface with the banks here, and there was no problem. And yeah, so I mean, I'm probably a bit unique in the world of BSVs. I kind of like Roger. I don't have anything bad to say about him myself.
right,
Other people say, but I personally have had no bad experiences with him, and I think he's very earnest and like genuine in what he tried to do with Bitcoin. So the whole Mount Gox thing, I think if I can remember right, the video he made, he was talking about Mount Gox's dollar reserves, like their fiat currency reserves. Because at that point, that's what people were worried about, right? They were saying they weren't thinking about the Bitcoin. They were
right.
only thinking about the dollars and the yen and whether they would be able to get that out.
Mm,
And so yeah, Roger did the video where he said, I've seen their bank statements or something, and they do have the dollars, which is true. They had the
right,
dollars. But in the end, it was the bitcoins they didn't have. And that turned out to be like the much, much bigger problem.
right.
And so that all got mixed up. And, like people started saying, Roger Ver told us that Mt. Gox was totally safe. He never actually did that. He was just saying that they had the fiat. So
Words got
anyway,
misconstrued, things
they did.
happened, and it's easy to take somebody's statements and kind of run away with them. So I'm curious, like since the Mount Gox thing, Japan seems to have a lot of like strict like rules and regulations when it comes to cryptocurrencies in general. And I'm curious if you think it kind of all stemmed from like the Mount Gox incident and the catalyst to the way that Japan treats regulations and everything nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely, it was. And I have heard this from like sources sort of closer to the Japanese government that there were people within the government who just wanted to squash it. Like they wanted to get rid of this crypto thing altogether because it was damaging Japan's reputation particularly, and it just didn't seem like a good idea in general. So but that's one thing I like about Japan is that they will take that closer look at it and analyze it and come up with a somewhat rational decision over
Mm,
what they do. Like it is a kind of very scientific and rational kind of country in many ways. So they looked at it and they're like, well, we shouldn't really get rid of this, and I don't know if we can. So the best thing to do would be to just regulate it the
mm.
way we do any other transaction. And so they did. They've new exchanges started to spring up within a few months of Mt. Gox going down, and that was even before they started regulating it strictly here. We even had Bitcoin ATMs that you could use, no KYC, anything for a few years after that.
Wow.
Yeah, it was I think around 2016 or 17, probably 17. They started to bring down the hammer on those things. All the ATMs disappeared almost overnight.
Oh, that's crazy. You think about like the parallels between like, no, we need to get rid of this, and then let's put up people are going to put up Bitcoin ATMs all over the place. Like,
Yeah. Well, they said they were going to regulate it, but it sort of took them a few years to get the regulation like going. And even now, like they're still sort of slowly implementing things that I'm surprised they haven't done it yet. But
well, I
as
know
Roger
recently
said,
we got, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I know recently we got BSV listed on Huobi Japan. So have you seen
yes,
like any new developments happen like in in Japan over like regulations and everything? Are they starting to lessen, I guess, the control or like the restrictions, or are they like, man, this is a good thing, and that's why we're gonna allow it to be listed?
Yeah, it's curious. I don't know what the full story is there, and whether other exchanges are going to jump on board. I think with the market the way it is at the moment, there's just not a huge demand for it.
Yeah.
If it was 2 years ago, maybe other exchanges would be rushing, but yeah, no one really cares much at the moment. They're just plodding along, doing their own thing. So
Yeah.
it's
I think
um
I think you also wrote something recently, like an article for CoinGeek that was like exchanges now have to provide customer information with transfers under like new laws or new regulation.
well, they are going to do that. And what that basically does is just brings it in line with regular FX trading and stock trading. If you do an inter exchange swap or a transfer, then they have to send their personal information as well. I was surprised because I thought they were doing that already, but apparently they weren't.
Yeah, it's interesting, for sure. So, I guess we could kind of move away from that a little bit. I was also curious, recently there's been like a slew of crypto CEOs and people stepping down like all over the
Mm.
place. And so I'm curious as to what your thoughts on all of that are. You think it's going to be better for the space that people like Jesse Powell are stepping down from Kraken, or
Yeah, that's a curious one, isn't it? Everyone has all sorts of theories. I think it could in part be just they're getting tired of it. There's a lot of people in this industry where the more crypto and Bitcoin becomes like the traditional finance industry, like the less fun it is. That's that's not saying that I think
right?
it should be less regulated or anything, but because I think that's just inevitable. But for a lot of those guys, it's probably like, well, you know, this is just too corporate now. It's just not fun anymore. I made all my money. Good time to get out. It's long bear market. The regulators are coming, and yeah, I should get out because people are saying they're doing it to avoid regulatory action, but I think that doesn't really matter because the regulators will come for people who did the wrong thing, no matter whether they're currently CEO or not. And yeah, I guess it's a combination of all those things. It's just not a great time to be in Bitcoin or crypto at the moment. And
And a lot of these people have already been in the industry, like you said, since very
yeah,
early on. And so now it's not as fun as.
they can see that Sam Bankman-Fried's coming in and he's just going to corner the whole crypto market. And they're like, I don't want to fuck this.
Well, it's like I talked to Patrick Thompson, and Patrick Thompson was telling me, he was like, like the SEC and the way that they view everything right now is like all of these things are already have laws around them that it can apply to cryptocurrencies in general, right now. So it's like it's not necessarily that we need regulation because the current laws that are in place already are there to help protect people. It's just I feel like there's those small little cracks, and they see the cracks that they need to try to cover to regulate that, and specifically with like CBDC currencies and whatnot. And I'm super interested to see what they do with Tether specifically.
Can you believe that Tether still exists? I mean, why is it still there? It's like everyone can see what's wrong with it. Everyone seems to know what's wrong with it. Was it the SEC or was it no? It's the New York Attorney General.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The
And then the US judge too, have recently come out and said that they need to produce like detailed documents about all their banking with US dollar tether. But I
yeah,
thought it was interesting because when we were talking about my, oh, I'm sorry. I,
they're gonna fight that one for a while.
yeah, they're gonna fight it, but it's like we were just talking about Mount Gox and how like everybody was so focused on whether or not it was back to the dollar. and now are like there's a lot of similarities here with Tether. It's like, well, is it backed? Because originally they said it was backed 1 to 1 USD. Then they came out and said it was 60 cents. And then they came back and said, oh, it's predominantly backed by this thing called commercial papers. And now the government's like, hey, something seems off here. You need to provide these documents. And so it's like, I don't know. Of course, when I spoke to Patrick about it, he was telling me that basically the reason that they operate out of these different countries is to kind of skirt underneath of the law because the laws are different in those countries. I just don't know how Tether is going to be allowed to continue their current trajectory with all the illegal things that they seem to be doing. I guess I shouldn't imply, but it seems like there's some malicious things there.
What amuses me most about Tether is just it's like a subset of the asset that it represents, which is US dollars. So if okay, a bit of the old school Bitcoiner coming out now, we used to rail against fiat currencies and we'd say they're backed by nothing and it's just paper and you need sound money. And and then you get this asset that is backed by paper currency that is not backed by anything in terms of like hard assets. So it's it's kind of funny in that sense. It just added this other like inception layer of trust to the currency everyone uses. I know people don't actually use Tether as money, spending money, but they do. They make large transactions in it, but usually between exchanges. And they, even though everyone knows that it's shaky, they still trust it. And I'm thinking, well, is the dollar really that much better? Which is going to fall first? The yen, the dollar, or Tether? It'd be really weird if like the dollar collapsed and we still had tethers. I mean, the way the world is at the moment, I can kind of see that scenario happening almost, and people just still using it because it works.
I think that's a good point. I mean, most people aren't even paying attention to like the global crises and the the war between like Russia and Ukraine right now. Like nobody's paying attention. So I guess at the same point, if people aren't paying attention to that, which could potentially one day affect them, the chances of them paying attention to USDT are fairly slim as well. I mean, so it could be
Because
that.
it's getting noticed more outside of the US because it's our fiat currencies that are collapsing. The US dollar is still going pretty strong. So we have Japanese yen. I think it's like 150 or $1.50 now for 100 yen, and whereas it's usually sort of more level,
Mm.
fluctuates around the 100 yen to a dollar mark. But yeah, it's really terrible at the moment. The British pound even worse, and those are both major currencies. The euro as well. So yeah, I think the collapsing fiat currencies are kind of coming to the forefront of everyone's mind around here. This interview could be totally out of date within 6 months in a good or bad way.
Oh gosh. Well,
I was
you
thinking, with Tether, what if Tether are like negotiating behind the scenes saying, okay, CBDCs, if you want the infrastructure to build a CBDC, like we've already built it, we've got your dollar surrogate here. All you have to do is just make us official, and we will be the official US dollar from now on. That could happen. I don't think so, but it could.
it's a very interesting thing to think about because I know isn't it Australia right now talking about rolling out something with the like a CBDC pilot program or something,
That's right.
and
Yeah.
so that's something to think on if all of these things are kind of happening in parallel with each other at the moment. I mean, everybody likes a good conspiracy theory, right?
Oh, I love conspiracy theories. Yeah.
Uh, I don't know what specifically to say about it. I know that regardless of all the things going on in the space or regulations and whatnot, BSB is Bitcoin is really positioned in a unique place where it's so different from everything else that we're capable utilizing this technology for so much good. And so things like a lot of people in the outside space toss around buzzwords like metanet and Web3 and all these other things, but on BSV we're actually capable of doing all of these things. And so we wouldn't even need like a CBDC if Bitcoin were just being utilized as a form of cash payments across the internet. We could just use that and not have to worry about everything else. But I'm kind of rambling.
Well, I just don't think governments would ever, really advocate for a currency that they don't have some sort of control over.
Yeah.
We've seen what happened with the euro, and that's even when theoretically they do have some say in policy, but not really. I don't think they're not going to go and use some, like open source digital asset that on a blockchain that someone else created and anyone can use. They want more control over it than that. So, a CBDC could conceivably run on BSV. In fact, it'd probably run better on BSV than anywhere else. And the theory goes that we should support that because they're coming anyway, and it might as well be on our blockchain in BSV because that's where it can be more transparent and you have more accountability if it's on the public blockchain. A CBDC that's no blockchain or your private ledger, I think we should be opposing that where we can.
You think?
Yeah. I don't like the idea of having just digital currency and nothing else to use. I mean, there's got to be some way to physically trade in the real world.
I mean, it's really interesting to hear your take on things. I mean, it's not too far off from what I view myself. I'm still really interested in to see what happens with the regulations and everything moving forward, but I kind of want to move away from all of that talk for a second. You've interviewed a lot of really cool people over the years now. And aside from say like meeting Craig Wright or something like that, who would you say is the most like impactful person that you've had the pleasure of getting to speak with? And what was it that you took away from the conversation?
The most impactful, and I'm not allowed to say Craig Wright.
Nah, don't someone other than Craig, because we all know it's like anybody in Bitcoin's gonna be like, oh well, Craig, somebody else.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I've done some really fun interviews, and half of them I don't even remember because you know what it's like. You're interviewing someone, and you're working the control panel, and you've got your list of questions, and sometimes when you listen back to it, you think, wow, he really dropped a truth bomb there, and I totally missed it. And yeah, so I could this is a confession here. I tend to remember the bad interviews more than the good ones because they're the ones I cringe at. So
hopefully this isn't one of them.
Technically this is your interview, so I do hope it's not one of your cringe ones. Yeah, now I can only remember all those really crappy ICO interviews that I was doing in 2017 and 18, and like sort of just trying to smile and believe that this person actually believed in what they were saying, or whether they were just scamming, or whether they didn't know they were scamming yet, that kind of thing. It's and they're the only ones I can keep in my mind right now. Yeah, maybe this is controversial too, but I actually liked interviewing Ryan X. Charles. I did him on my own show, and I think I did an audio podcast with him a couple of years before that when he was like transitioning from BTC to Litecoin. It was before there was even a Bitcoin Cash. So yeah, I think that's what I remember because it was Ryan who elaborated all the problems with the the limits of the small blocks to me. As a reporter, I was being really objective and I was just reporting on everything. And it's like, this is the small blocker argument, this is the big blocker argument. And I didn't really have a side. And yeah, I think when I spoke to him about moving to Litecoin, that's when he said, I started to realize that it was just impossible to run a business and run the kind of services that depended on micropayments and fast payments and that kind of thing. You just couldn't do that anymore with BTC. And I mean, I already knew that it was crappy and fees were too high and it was slow and everything, but I'd never really thought of it from a project manager's perspective, what it was like to actually try to build something on that. He was running yours.org, which is like Medium with Bitcoin. And yeah, it couldn't be done anymore. And you couldn't have all those like Bitcoin games like Satoshi Dice and all of those things. And I noticed that they were all starting to disappear, and that merchants just weren't accepting it anymore. They had this like Bitcoin terminal sitting on the corner, and it was just dusty because they couldn't use it. And yeah, so maybe that's the one I remember most, not because it's the most amazing interview ever, but just because it was the one that got me thinking and probably changed the direction that I was going in.
That's interesting. Yeah, I really enjoyed the interview that I had with Ryan as well. I know that they're not working on the project anymore, and Ryan has kind of stepped away. But Ryan was a very interesting person in the space, and he added a lot of value to the space too. So it's a kind of a sad thing to see him walk a different path right now.
Well, we really need those philosophers. I think that's what keeps it interesting for me. If we're just talking about businesses all the time, then it does get a bit dry and boring. I know BSV has an amazing variety compared to other blockchains, and blockchains that work. And I guess we need those people. We needed the Ryan X Charleses, and the Daniel Krawitz is another one. Like he was one of the reasons I came to BSV, because I used to really love reading his articles over at the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute back in the way early days, like 2012. And when I realized that he was doing BSV too, I'm like, all right, yes, I'm definitely taking a closer look at this. And yeah, I love talking to Daniel. Most of the time, I have no response to the things he says.
It's hard.
But that's my fault, not his.
Yeah.
He's a great.
He's got some great concepts and things he was thinking about, like concepts he was thinking about like in the early days, and like just now finally, years later, a decade later, people are like, oh yeah, like hyper Bitcoinization, like we should be thinking about this. And it's like, man, Daniel was thinking about this back in how long ago?
Yeah. Well, you see, after a while, we're just doing the blockchain agnostic news. It got really boring because in a bear market, no one's got anything to talk about. There's no new businesses starting up. All you have is like a couple of scams running, and people just trying to start some enthusiasm, which just isn't happening because there's no money and no excitement. And yeah, I really missed all those sort of more philosophical articles. It's not the what are we doing, it's the why. It's not just sound money and wanting to be your own bank or anything like that. It's it's getting into the real sort of deeper roots, the machine level, why we do Bitcoin and what it can be used for. And you gotta, yeah. Now I'm rambling.
No, that's okay. Like I always love hearing people's like inner thoughts, because I sometimes they run alongside my own thoughts. And so it's nice to hear other people think that way as well, because it makes me not feel like I'm crazy for thinking about all these things all the time. 'Cause
I ask you, who was your most impactful interview?
mine,
you've done more than me now. You crank out a lot more shows than I do.
really,
Yeah. And you're not allowed to say Craig, right?
yeah. Well, I haven't got to interview Craig or meet him yet. Obviously there's a lot of cool things that Craig has said, like, in videos that I've seen and whatnot, that have had a really impactful meaning on me. But believe it or not, it was Kurt that pulled me into the BSB community, because prior to there was a video in uh March of 2020, that was last year, that I watched with him, and he was in a show like Master of the Puppeteers Have Been Exposed or something like that. And like you, I love a good conspiracy theory, right? And so
Yep.
I clicked on it, and I wasn't thinking it was going to go anywhere, and then I watched it all the way through, and my eyes were wide open. I was like, What? Like, are you kidding me? And so I had a buddy that was in a BSB, and he had been telling me all of these things since the fork and whatnot, because I had some BTC, I had some BCH, and during the splits, like I got all of that stuff. And I was it was around the time like Poloniex was going down. I was like, man, I don't know how to get this BSB thing that I have out of Poloniex. And they're saying that I got to get my stuff out. And he was all like, oh, well, don't get rid of it. Send it over here. He showed me how to use it and whatnot. And then I just left it there. But he continued talking to me about it, like, hey, this is really great. And I was like, I was a BTC maxi at the time, it sucks to
Really?
say. But yeah, it was Kurt that changed my mind. So I would say like that was the best thing. And I love interviewing Kurt, but probably one of my favorite interviews was the interview I did with Jerry Chan.
Right.
Yeah.
Another member of the Tokyo Bitcoin meetup, Jerry Chan, and a great guy. He's taught me so much.
Jerry kind of changed my world view about Bitcoin and what it could be and how it can get there. And I appreciated that conversation with him a lot.
Right. It's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah. I mean, I believe it, but yeah, also very interesting.
Uh,
Oh, never mind. Don't answer
what?
that. I was going to say, who's the worst interview you've ever had?
um,
It's not necessary.
it's not. Honestly, everybody that I've interviewed thus far has been really cool. Like honestly, like I haven't had any issues with anybody. Sometimes I'll get an interview. I'm sure like you've had that is like a little lackluster versus other interviews where you're like, oh man, I love that conversation. You know what I'm saying? Um, but I'm just I guess
I know how you feel.
I guess I'm just curious if let's see what am I trying to say here? What would you like to see happen in the future for Bitcoin moving forward?
For Bitcoin, in my total wildest fantasy land, I'd love to see Craig Wright win all his court cases, claim copyright over the Bitcoin transaction database, and shut them all down. I think that's fantasy. I don't think it'll quite happen that way. Secretly, it's what I would like to happen. I just we've just been through another court case, and I know to a lot of people, court cases are not the most interesting thing that's happening in Bitcoin, and they shouldn't be. But unfortunately, they are a prominent thing, and it does kind of matter who wins them.
Yeah.
I mean, it matters a lot who wins them, but yeah, I'd like to see something decisive happen there. I want a judge to come up and say, like, Craig Wright is obviously Satoshi Nakamoto, and like put their big wax stamp on it.
Right.
And yeah, instead of these sort of like, half-baked rulings that we get, and like, oh, we're finding in favor of you on a technicality, and this case's purpose is not to decide whether Craig Wright is Satoshi Nakamoto. And you're like, what do you mean? That was the only reason I was watching it. So I want to see something actually happen in these cases. Just one way or the other. I just want a decision. I get tired of these sort of false peaks every time.
Do you think
Victories
it hurts
celebrate.
us?
Yeah, it does, but I think we can't really do without it either.
Mm.
It's if we didn't fight back, and I say we because it's Craig doing all the fighting here, but if Craig didn't fight back, then we would just get trolled into oblivion. They've got the numbers, they've got the botnets, they've got the insiders. They could just shut us down on every network that we're on. I think we push Craig out in front and say, like, you fight for us.
Yeah.
So we don't have to. And as much as people complain that it gives us a bad image, I mean, just imagine what would happen if he wasn't doing that, if he wasn't out there fighting the battles. People wouldn't care about BSV. They just ignore us, I think. So it's
So what do you
yeah.
see happening in like the best case scenario where he does start? I mean, honestly, I feel like the last court case, not the Hodl Knot one, but the one before that was a win. I felt like that was a win. And
Mhm.
some people might say differently, but sure felt like a win. And then even with the Hodlonaut case, regardless of the
Yes.
outcome, like if all of a sudden Craig starts winning more and more cases, how do you feel like what do you think the outside community is gonna say? What do you think their response is gonna be? You think they're gonna double down and try to attack us more, or do you think they might be like,
Mm.
oh, I've seen the light?
I'd like to see it get to the point where they can't credibly attack us. And I don't mean, because they're under threat of getting sued or anything. I just want them to, I just want us to have that legitimacy of some solid legal decisions. For every judge that finds Craig's evidence convincing, that's one more nail in the coffin of all the people. Even their documents saying, well, this date is faked, and this font wasn't used in that year, and on this version, and that kind of thing. I mean, document forensics has got its place and everything, but it's just one aspect
Mm,
of the whole story. And I think the the more the more decisions we can get in our favor, then the weaker their arguments get, whatever they are, whether they're based on forensics or whether it's just like hearsay and speculation. Because at the end of the day, the biggest, loudest point they've got is that Craig Wright is a fraud because everyone thinks he's a fraud, just like Hodlonaut said, because we all said so, and because he
right.
just seems dodgy. Um, to them, to them. Um, and yeah, I think those arguments get weaker and weaker with every victory he has. Even the default victories, like Cobra, it's just if you he didn't come to defend it, so Craig won. So what can you say? I think these all stack up. The Cobra one's going to be big if it ever happens. I mean, who knows? The situation seems to change all the time.
Yeah, I noticed that like they were getting really out there, and they like attacked people in our community and whatnot, and it was heartbreaking to just like, man, this is so bad to some people out there that Craig wins or be put in the spotlight or whatever, that they're willing to try to hurt people over being upset about the situation, really, you know?
Yeah, that was lame. And I mean, I think it's all hot air at the end of the day, but when you're half in and out of the digital world, threats online can cause you as much hassle as a real life, person waiting outside your apartment with an axe. So
Well, I
yeah, I
think
mean, you still
it's
take the precautions because you just never know.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, because I mean, you think about like all the bad things that used to transpire on the BTC thing, and that was a really good note that I was like thinking about the other day. I think it was actually I was in talks I think with Jack Blue a little bit, but I was thinking about how um I feel like since Craig fixed Bitcoin and brought it back to his original vision, he saw the bad things that occurred on BTC, like the dark web, Silk Roads, yada yada yada. And so he's really trying to spearhead all of the bad issues that he saw occur the first time and kind of head it off this time so that they don't occur again. And I
Yeah.
think I think that's why there's so much more emphasis on like court proceedings and rulings, judgments this go around, because it was kind of like he was going through so much the first go around that all of these things ended up happening. And it's kind of like a teenager where you didn't reprimand your teenager for so many years, and now that they're being bad and they're misbehaving, it's hard to go back and start the punishment now because they're so unruly. You kind of got to get the law to help you out. But if you're strict with your child early on, then maybe there'll be a better outcome.
Too.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Now I'm paranoid about that too. I've got a kid who's almost a teenager, and I'm not very strict.
It's yeah, it's also your different styles of parenting though too, I mean, if you love your kid, you don't need to do such harsh parenting, because I noticed that like with my own kids, sometimes just saying I'm disappointed in your actions or your behaviors is enough to like totally devastate them, and that hurts worse than like being super strict, like seeing the pain in their eyes knowing that they disappointed you. Like I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it.
Well, at the end of the day, when you're a kid, that is the biggest disappoint, or the most impactful thing a parent can say. Like they can say you did a bad thing, and you're like, well, I don't think so. But if they say I'm disappointed in you, then you're like, oh, my main role in life is to please my parents. And
Oh man. Well, gosh, I feel like the conversation was a little bit all over the place, but I feel like we covered a bunch of cool topics.
do you have that like definitive thing that we could wrap it up with?
Yeah, I was about to say, is there anything that you wanted to say, or is there anything that you want people to take away from the show as a whole? Any final closing thoughts or statements?
Yes. BSV is the original Bitcoin. You should use it. I'm not saying go out and buy it. Just use use BSV services. Wow, that was really powerful, wasn't it?
Use BSV. Hey, you know what? I think people that are going to watch this video are that's something that we really work on in the BSV community, is to earn and spend versus like investing and buying.
But like, even if you're not interested in using it, just find out more. Find out more about BSV and why it's different to BTC, why they both call themselves Bitcoin, and you'll soon discover that BSV actually works, regardless of what you think of Craig Wright, regardless of what you think of CoinGeek or me or Brittany or anyone else in BSV. I mean, that's at the end of the day, it's the Bitcoin protocol that works, and you can do stuff on it, and you can do lots of cool stuff on it too. You just can't do with BTC or Ethereum or Solana when it's turned on, or anything like
that. I like the little jab there at the end. Or Solana when it's turned on.
It's turned on now? I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, I love it. And you can actually learn more about Bitcoin by going to Bitcoin 101 at CoinGeek.com. We'll be playing an ad here right after this, so make sure to check it out. But John, I really appreciate you coming on the show today and
having me on, Brittany. It's been
chatting
great
with me. It has been great talking with you. You've been a pleasure to chat with.
I'm so impressed by the work you do and the regularity at which you do it too. So yeah, please. May you have many more.
Thank you, John. Well, with that being said, guys, that's going to wrap it up for today. Make sure to hit the like and subscribe button, and we'll see you next time. All right. Bye-bye.
Bitcoin mining, Bitcoin wallet, blockchain, stablecoins, MetaNet, the evolution of money. Everybody is talking about Bitcoin today. But what exactly is it? Learn the basics from experts. Learn what Bitcoin is, how it works, and why it matters. Bitcoin 101, your ultimate guide to the fundamentals of blockchain.
Thank you for watching. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment below. Share this video with a friend, and also follow us on Twitter at BrittanyBits.